It's music therapy. It's music therapy.
Music Therapy with Briankrock. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Music Therapy with me, Briankrock. This is my Q&A show where I answer questions gleaned from here on YouTube, on my Instagram page, and at my Patreon page. So let's get right into it. Evan Phillips asks,
opinions on Steely Dan.
Well, I don't know if you're into that kind of thing, I guess, like high fidelity recordings of brilliant songs performed by some of the greatest jazz and session musicians of the 20th century, then yeah, I guess Steely Dan is okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I love Steely Dan. They're unbelievable. When I got my new pair of headphones, the first record I wanted to listen to was Asia. I'll just take this opportunity to plug an awesome podcast, really the best podcast as far as I'm concerned, which is called Deep Focus. And there's an episode where the incredible musician Arturo O'Farrell talks about why he loves Steely Dan, and you get to listen to unreleased recordings of the band playing live. So check out Deep Focus. Steely Dan is the shit. All right, moving on. Finn Fugel asks,
how do I listen to free jazz? I don't dislike it, but I feel like I don't get it. Should I just leave it?
In my life, I've often found myself in the same position that Finn Fugel is in, where a musician that I look up to tells me, dude, you need to check out this music, it's amazing. And I listen to it and I just don't get it. I know that it must be good because a respected source told me about it, and I really want to understand it. I'm generally intrigued by things that are just out of my grasp. Things that I don't understand excite me. So what do we do? First of all, don't leave it. You're going to be robbing yourself of experiencing some of the best music created by human beings in the case of free jazz, which is kind of a misnomer, but we all understand what you mean when you say free jazz. Learning some history to give you context is useful. Start by maybe reading some Amiri Baraka or some George Lewis or some Phil Freeman. Then, if you already like another kind of jazz, use that as a sort of window in. For example, John Coltrane is often a gateway drug into free jazz. You could listen to Coltrane's record Live at the Vanguard with Eric Dolphy, or listen to Ascension, and then from there, maybe check out Ornette Coleman's album Free Jazz, and try to listen for what's similar, what's different, where are they connected. The more you can sort of draw yourself a path from like early American blues and Appalachian music through the swing era and big band music into bebop and post-bop, and follow this path, you will see how it evolves somewhat naturally. And that will let you understand that what these musicians were doing, like Ornette, who just had his birthday recently, is really anything but free. I mean, it breaks through barriers of form and harmony, but it's really related deeply to the blues, and it's extremely melodic. It is not formless. That is one of the most common misconceptions about free jazz. It's actually quite the opposite. These artists are building incredibly unique forms. Check out like Sun Ra or the Art Ensemble of Chicago. Think about the social circumstances around the time that these artists were working. Think about the theatricality, the musicality, the unwillingness to compromise, the spirituality, the political implications, the societal implications of the music. All of these things are important to be able to understand what's really going on inside the music. So my recommendation would really be, don't leave it alone. Listen to it more. Matt Fichter asked,
How do you arrange extended chords for a sax quartet? I'm trying to use 13s and sharp 11s, but with only 4 voices, it's difficult to make them sound full.
First of all, you need to remember that there's a ton of harmonic information encoded in just a single note, in its overtones. And the overtones are, in general, more prevalent in lower pitches. So for example, like your question, if you wanted to orchestrate a C13 sharp 11 with just 4 voices, and the bottom voice is maybe the low A on a baritone saxophone, which is a concert low C, this already has in it so you can really leave out the 5th. You can almost leave out the 3rd. If I just had 4 voices to orchestrate a C13 sharp 11, I think I would do something like this. C, B flat, F sharp, and A. You could even go so far as to do something like... That's a really spread voicing, so that'll give you the fullness you're looking for. You might consider incorporating movement so you can get more than one note with intermoving voices. For example, say you had an outer shell of the 7th and the 13th, you could make the interior voice move. But to get more to the point, I think when you're writing for 4 voices of any instrumentation, whether it's a string quartet, a sax quartet, or a random grouping of chamber ensemble instruments, I think you should think more about the vertical counterpoint and less about the horizontal chord qualities, because you can imply a lot of harmony with very few voices. If you're coming from an F minor chord with, let's just use 3 voices, F, A flat, and B flat, you could move by contrary motion from A flat up to B flat and B flat down to A natural. What an interesting sound. Then I just moved to D flat, B natural, and G natural. There's very few voices there, but I was just pretty inspired by just the idea of contrary motion. Whatever, play around with it. Think about the counterpoint more than the vertical chord qualities, and you can imply something more subtle than just, a kind of boring chord. Jake Reed asks,
What are some cool modern big bands I should listen to besides Big Heart Machine?
None. No, I'm just kidding.
I love Darcy James Argue's Secret Society and Maria Schneider's orchestra.
I love those bands too. There's an incredible amount of super interesting big band music being created today all around the world. So I couldn't possibly mention every great big band. So I'll just tell you about a few that I really love. First of all, I love Jihei Lee. I also love Migiwa Miyajima, her band, the Miggy Augmented Orchestra. The Anna Weber and Angela Morris big band. I think Anna and Angela are 2 of the great creative composers today. Erica Seguin and Shannon Baker have a great jazz orchestra with a new record coming out soon that was produced by Darcy James Argue. Of course, there's Miho Hazama's M Unit, which is an incredible band led by an incredible composer, Miho Hazama. I really love Michael Formanek's ensemble Colossus. Overseas, I really love the music of Claudia Döfinger. The great drummer Jared Schoenig put together a big band session last year that features just an incredible band of like classic New York players. I wrote something for that record that has Charles Pillow playing the bass flute, and I think it's also going to feature some incredible soloists. I guess I shouldn't say too much. I know John Gordon was playing lead alto on that. Finally, Sam Eastman leads a band called the Spike Orchestra, and I've been loving this one record they made of some John Zorn music. There's also Sam Blakesley, great trombonist who's writing incredible large ensemble music. So as I'm listing all these different names of incredibly talented and interesting composers, the one thing that it makes me think is that there's, the world of big band music is definitely exciting and in good hands, and I'm sure I'm leaving some people out. Remy LaBeouf, Seth Weaver, Stephen Feifke, Chris Zuar. There's so many. Josh Autumn says,
I'd love to hear you talk about arrangement/orchestration techniques gleaned from non-notated sources. I'm thinking of folks like Eno, Lanois, Brian Wilson, Timbaland, many others who I assume aren't notating their contributions to records.
I constantly have orchestration ideas from listening to non-notated musical sources. For example, the tune Paride Alaic from Big Heart Machine Live at the Jazz Gallery features a delay effect throughout almost all of the piece where certain instrumentalists are playing music a 16th note later than other instrumentalists. I'll show you guys the score so you can see what I'm talking about. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that those artists that you just mentioned, what they're doing is orchestration. They just use different tools. So for example, when somebody like, say, Blake Mills uses a drinking glass, the clink of a drinking glass, and then adds a really long reverb tail to it, and then EQs the shit out of it, that's an orchestration decision just as much as Nelson Riddle telling a section of violin players to put their mute on and play Sol Ponticello is. Those are both orchestration decisions. They're just using different tools. So it's great to listen to records from the, more production-oriented worlds and listen closely and think about how you might recreate those sounds with a live band. I get ideas like that all the time. Great question. Francis S. asks,
how do I learn to balance my time between clarinet and composition better?
I wish I could tell you, man. Managing time is a constant struggle for everyone. You're not alone in this. I've seen videos where people espouse their daily routines and their crazy things that they do where they wake up every morning at 7 a.m. and they practice for 4 hours and they exercise and then they blah, blah, blah. The truth of the matter that they're not telling you is that if you're really planning on being a freelance musician, it's going to be impossible to have a real routine because every day will be different in your life. Some days you're going to be out until 3 a.m. for a gig. Some days you're going to have to drive an hour and a half to get to a wedding. Some days you're going to be flying or traveling on a bus and you won't get to practice at all. Some days you'll just need a self-care day and you'll need to lie on the couch and watch TV all day, and that's okay too. So my recommendation, and what seems to work well for me, is to have a maintenance routine on your instrument that you know will at least keep you in playing shape. So many practice sessions, I never even get around to any creative stuff or learning anything new. I just do my maintenance routine. And on all my instruments, it's the same. It's about 30 minutes or so of long tones. Long tones is the most important thing, playing overtones. I think about this sort of as like getting stretched out before you play a sport. You have to do your long tones. Then scales and arpeggios, and then articulation exercises. Those few things will at least let me know that my fingers, my tongue, and my air will be in shape to play. Set yourself up with a good maintenance routine. Now, composing is a different beast altogether. It requires flexibility. I often get inspired with an idea like right before I'm about to fall asleep, and then I have to get my lazy ass out of bed and jot an idea down and sketch something out so that the next morning I'll remember that I want to start working on it. Sometimes you'll have a commission and you just have to crank something out in like a week or a couple days. And that's going to take 100% of your focus. And sometimes you just don't feel like writing. I really think the best thing that you can do is to create a mental space for yourself where composing is like your fun activity and something that you look forward to. The other thing is like you have to live life. And so leave room in your schedule to go on walks, listen to music, read books, have meals with your friends, socialize. These things are just as important. Writing and playing are not the most important things. I promise you. In general, my advice to you is to be easy on yourself. Take it easy. It's okay. Sometimes you're going to have a good balance and a good flow, and sometimes you're going to be so busy or things are going to feel hectic, and you're going to have to let your horn languish or your writing languish. And just know that that happens to me all the time, and it happens to everyone I know. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not bad. You're okay. Hello, my name is Joe. I think he's had a question on every single one of my Q&A videos so far. This is a great question. He said,
A lot of people here on YouTube have been talking about 4-chord loops and how to analyze them lately. See Patricia Taxon and 12-tone. Thoughts?
Thank you for telling me about Patricia Taxon. I watched that video about 4-chord loops with my jaw on the floor. I was so impressed and just had such a good time. I strongly co-sign everything that she said, and I'm going to redirect you there. All I would like to add is to tell you about a similar technique that I use all the time in my own writing that I call spiraling loops. Let me just tell you about the inspiration for it. It came to me when I was on a hike with my sister, and I felt inspired by the seeming contradiction of the woods, where it's really easy to get lost on a hike because everything that you're seeing seems to be the same. But real experts don't get lost because they're looking at the finer details. They're looking at the bark on trees and the moss on rocks and whatever. I mean, I don't really know how they do it, but nature experts, I don't know what you would call them. So even though things seem on the surface to be constantly the same on a hike, nothing is ever actually the same. It's this interesting thing of repetition, but also novelty constantly. Inspired by that hike, I wrote a 45-minute suite of music called Tamil Pious. And it's all based around this idea of everything changing while everything stays the same. And in order to evoke that feeling in the listener, I came up with a 4-chord loop that never repeats. What do I mean by this? Well, the chord sequence goes B major, followed by G minor, followed by D minor, and then F sharp major. But I added many layers of abstraction to this idea. So first of all, once it gets to F sharp major, instead of resolving back to B, it resolves to C sharp major, and then the same sequence repeats, but up a whole step. So it sounds like this: B major, G minor, D minor, F sharp major, C sharp major, A minor, E minor, and then G sharp major, and so on. Then the next thing I did was that I played around with the 3 inversions of a major chord, alternating between the root position, first inversion, and second inversion. So that makes the cycle even longer before it repeats. It goes root position B major, first inversion G minor, second inversion D minor, root position F sharp, first inversion C sharp, second inversion A minor, root position E minor, and so on and so forth. It's pretty confusing. I was just having trouble even remembering it. That sounded cool enough on its own, but then on top of that, I added daisy chains of suspensions. So for example, if you look at the trumpets in measure 58, it goes something like this. Instead of starting on D flat major, there's a suspension. These triads are smudged in a way, almost like somebody who's painting might smudge their charcoal. So something that once sounded like now it sounds like to me, this creates a kind of music that sounds like it's always repeating, but it actually never repeats. And I love how that sounds so much that I've kind of used that technique in a lot of different music of mine ever since then. Finally, Joaquin Mendoza asked me to mention my favorite South American composers, and I'm really glad he asked that because I grew up studying the classical guitar, so I was lucky to get exposed to a lot of maybe lesser known composers in the wider world because they are exclusively guitar composers. Of these, my favorites have to be Antonio Lauro from Venezuela, Leo Brouwer from Cuba, and above all, Barrios, Agustin Barrios Mangore, who's from Paraguay. Playing Barrios's pieces like La Catedral, Julia Florida, Choro de Saudade, when I was in high school, those experiences made a profound impact on how I compose for the guitar, and I feel so lucky that I was exposed to that beautiful music. It takes advantage of the strange, idiomatic intricacies of the guitar in such a beautiful way. Yeah, Barrios is one of the best composers for guitar that I'm aware of. And there's a lot of other great South American guitar composers. I also love Astor Piazzolla, of course, a name that I've mentioned now 3 or 4 times on this channel. And I'd really strongly recommend you check out is the Brazilian composer Toninho Horta. But if I had to pick my favorite South American composer, it's not that complicated. It's Antonio Carlos Jobim. When I think about Jobim, I think about the hundreds of hours that I've spent at restaurants, wedding gigs, just, general corporate work that I've done as a freelance saxophone player, playing tunes by Jobim, Wave, Desafinado, Triste, Girl from Ipanema, Corcovado, How Insensitive. As I'm listing them, I'm realizing that maybe no other composer other than like Cole Porter or maybe Richard Rodgers has so many stone cold classic jazz standards that are just ripe for improvisation. the thing about Jobim's music that's so fascinating is that it's so singable, it's so immediate, but they're anything but simple compositions. They're full of lush chromaticism and strange, unusual forms, and the melodies aren't even very straightforward. So for example, I think it's. Oof. I mean, come on. How Insensitive is such a beautiful song. It's one of my favorite tunes to play. So, Antonio Carlos Jobim. And on that note, thank you everybody for checking out this Q&A. If you want to have your questions answered by me, the easiest way to do that is to follow me on Instagram or click subscribe here, because I will let you know when I'm looking for my next round of questions. And if you have a lot of questions, you can sign up for my Patreon page, because I maintain an active correspondence with all of my patrons. I always try to answer their questions, and I'm available for private lessons too. So thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.